Insurance Business TV was recently in the Gold Coast attending the 2025 NIBA convention. Whilst there, we caught up with leading insurance professionals who address some of the top challenges the industry is facing today.
NIBA is the voice of the sector, and in order to advocate effectively, we actually need a lot more analytics and data, empirical info from within our membership and their clients, so that when we're talking to politicians and regulators, when we're trying to help and frame up good policy, we're actually coming from a position of substance and deep insight. So that's the reason why we did it. What we did is we went into market in 3 different ways. A lot of qualitative conversations across the senior leadership of the sector, number one. Number two, we interviewed brokers. Hundreds of brokers responded to our quantitative survey. And the third bit of data collect was we actually have been talking to consumers and customers who use brokers to get their perspective. So all that aggregate data has kind of come together. Today we released the first of the reports. It's called Ready or Reacting. It's really looking at the broker into 2035. What does the next 10 years look like in broking? And look, probably the big headlines are that we've effectively built a roadmap of understanding of what are some of the big issues facing into brokers, what are the areas of concern, and where are the gaps. Top 3 areas of concern are obviously technology change, AI and how it's going to impact the way brokers work and interact with their clients, their suppliers. Second one is a big theme around regulation and perhaps over-regulatory reach. A lot of complexity in regulation equals lots of cost, lots of energy spent complying where it could be spent innovating, and a lot of regulation that gets bolted on rather than replaced. So there's a conversation happening across Australia, not just in financial services, but how do we right-size regulation so that it lets markets breathe, but ultimately it lets us serve clients in a much more effective way. That's the second thing. And the third thing was about the changing role of broker, from being someone who places risk to someone who places risk but really understands the risks that businesses and consumers and communities will face. So those things together are 3 of the top ones out of 8 that really are big challenges facing the sector, but also a lot of the big opportunities. I think the conversation we've been having at the conference, and more broadly, is that brokers at their best sit alongside business owners and decision makers and help them understand and interpret the risk landscape that's out there. Whether you're running a trucking business, an intel business, hospitality business. And when a broker sits with a business owner and asks the right questions around, so what are the risks that you're facing? And bringing in some global insight around some of the themes and trends around climate change, cyber, those kind of things, you end up with a very rich advisory conversation that then ultimately ends up in a problem-solving solution, which is, so how do I manage this risk? Do I offset it? Do I mitigate it? Do I remove myself from the risk equation? So it's those kind of conversations, and it's happening today already. A lot of brokers are really at that front line with customers asking those questions. So rather than just being, hey, you got a problem, I got a solution, let's talk, it's much more, let's understand your problems, let's provide some input before we even talk about what the solutions are. And I think that's where the future of broking is looking. Certainly concerns for some people, so that as they move from strategy, from more transaction to much more strategic positioning. But I think what it's pointing to is that, certainly for NIBA, for anyone in leadership positions in broking firms, big organizations, is helping people step through that change. I think that's where the opportunity sits. It absolutely did, because people saw the opportunity, but we then asked the question, so how ready are you for that? And there's a gap. Across the big 8 issues, how big of an issue is it and how prepared are you? There's a gap in everything. And I think that gap speaks to some of the concern, but I think it speaks to the opportunity for the sector to go, you know what? We've actually got to help people step through this chain so that they are equipped, have the right conversations with the right tools and so on. So yeah, I think, as I've looked at the report now, that really gives a roadmap, certainly for NIBA and I think broadly for the sector, about the things that we're going to step into over the next 2, 3, 5 and 10 years. If I look at the informed consent conversation that's been going through the sector around disclosure, anytime we ran a conversation on it, we were flooded with interest, flooded with demand. So things like, what's the role of the broker? Things like use of AI for broking firms are places where the NIBA board's now already starting to think about. So those are a couple of examples. We already have, for example, our Insure Your Future, addressing one of the big 8 is talent into the sector. We already have a well thought out offer about how to bring more people into the sector. We've just set up Project Athena inside NIBA, which is around our education offer. And thinking about pathways of learning, one of the themes that's turned up today is you got to be really sharp on your toolkit. And probably every 5 years, you've really got to go back on the tools and figure out, are we sharp enough in terms of our expertise and professional capability and so on. And I think it really is a big and important area for NIBA to lead and guide on, which is, so what does the pathway of learning and development look like from the start of your broking career to the end of your broking career? I think we need to have a view on that. That's what we're starting to frame up. We're currently going through the consultation process, and with our independent reviewer, the NIBA board has been really active on managing that process, because integrity of the process is important as well as the outcome. In terms of where the outcome is, we've received a draft report from the code reviewer. As soon as it's the final report, we will release it to the public and then open the debate up, because there's a substantive amount of insight and input that's come from across the stakeholders. Plus, we're in a market where self-regulation is actually your calling card of leadership. And when you lead, there are a lot of easy and tough and difficult and nuanced conversations to have. So that's kind of where we're at. Likely we'll need to go out to further member consultation before we then start the redrafting of what the code will look like. Clearly a 2026 objective. And of course, the ICA code is in redraft. So there's a lot of interactivity with other codes and discussions happening around the market. Big commitment from the NIBA board to guide, to lead, and to make sure that the code process delivers a code that we can all be proud of.